Hello everyone, welcome to Tuesday Tea Time with Elsa. I have Ari with me here and Ocasio, who's bound to be making some noise during this tea time. He's always sure there's something to play with. In the chair I have my hoof trimming tools and some brushes, all very interesting toys for Ocasio. So today I wanted to talk about emotions in motion. This is an idea that I have played with for a long time, and Cassie's just going to distract me this whole time, I can tell. I feel like maybe we should just turn around and include him in the video. Here we go. Now you're on camera, Cassio. So, emotions in motion. Some of you guys know I just completed the 4x4x48 marathon, which is where you travel 4 miles every 4 hours for 48 hours. And this was really helpful for me. It's been a really emotional couple of months, if not a year. And I was feeling the need to do a little bit of processing before I start off on my teaching tour. And this is a theory that I put into practice with my horses a lot too. The idea that when they're very emotional, when they're overly emotional, and it seems to be getting in the way of real life, finding some way to put those emotions into motion, into action, really helps them process through the body. See, I have some comments here. Oh, Laurence, yes, I'm looking forward to seeing you in Belgium as well. So this idea that, emotions, they don't just live in the mind, they live in the body. We all know that feeling of when you're nervous, you end up sort of feeling sick to your stomach. When you're angry, you feel it in your body. Hi, Ocasio. Ocasio here is my horse that he is always in motion. And he has a lot of emotions. He feels a lot of things. He's just a very sensitive soul. And he tends to be fairly extroverted about the way he handles it. What's interesting about that is Ocasio doesn't seem to hold grudges the same way that my other horses do. So he can get really upset, and 5 minutes later, he's back to try it again. He just doesn't seem to hold on to his problems quite the same way as other horses do. He has a lot of problems. He has a lot of issues. He's a very interesting horse, but he lets them go very easily. Good morning, Eve. Welcome to tea time. So, this is a theory that doesn't fit with freedom-based training, because when horses are free to do whatever they would like, sometimes they stew in their emotions. Sometimes they feel things very strongly and they don't process them very well. Okay, you can see Atlas. He's up on the hill there under the tree. He's my big blonde giant, and he's my example of a horse that does not process his emotions very well. He tends to stand very still for long periods of time. When something bad happens, he absolutely hangs on to it. He's very quick to lose trust, very slow to gain it back again. Cassie is just going to show you how active he is at all times. So every horse has a natural way that they've learned to cope with the stress they have. I've found that my 2 stallions, Ari here and Atlas, who's up on the hill, both of them are more introverted. They don't put themselves into motion very often. They really depend on Ocasio, the gray one, to help them process what they feel. Otherwise, they just tend to stand around and it stagnates. And I find when horses really stagnate on problems that they have, those problems tend to multiply. Eve says Ed definitely doesn't process his emotions very well. I'm sorry. Yeah, some of them are like that. And yeah, I agree, Rebecca. Ocasio is so much fun. He's a little bit more complicated in a lot of ways because everything he feels turns into an action. And whereas, my stallions, they'll feel something and then they'll think about it and then they'll decide whether they want to take an action or not. Ocasio is a little bit more of a quick response. He feels something, he does something. And he doesn't think about whether it's a good thing or a bad thing. He just turns every feeling into a response. Hey, Sandra, you're there from Mozambique. Awesome. Awesome. I'm glad you made it to tea time. So when we take this theory that emotions are a feeling in the body, and the way we process those emotions and the way that we work through them is by putting the body in motion. And so one of the things I realized, I recently went through a whole lot of footage from my first film with Myrna, the Mustang, and I realized that the way she was also a little bit more like Ocasio, a little bit quicker to get into movement, but not as extreme as Ocasio. She was a much more subtle, gentle version of that action. And what I realized is in our early days, we walked a lot. We walked miles and miles and miles and miles. And we could do that all in freedom because it came so naturally to her. I didn't have to force her into it, and she didn't really run away from me. It was really a thing that we could do together. And so that meant that the things that she felt, she could feel them, we could act on them, and we could process them, and things didn't build up inside her. So yeah, exactly, Shelley. That book, The Body Keeps Score, it's so relevant to what I'm talking about right now. My stallions, Ari and Atlas, who's up on the hill, they really tend to stew in their emotions. And that means that you think things are fine, but they're not really fine. And so I'm learning that they're very different than Myrna was. And with Ari here, I'm really trying to keep all of my training freedom-based, which means that for the most part, I don't put him in a situation where he has to move and he has to walk because I really want him to offer it. And he's stable enough that I think that we can develop that over time. The one exception is when it comes to being with the other stallions. When I put the stallions together, there's a lot of emotions that are going to turn into a fight rather quickly if I don't put them into motion soon enough. So with my two stallions together, I will make sure that I have a enclosed enough space that if they start to get too hot, too worried, too concerned, too anxious, too fighty, I can ask them to take a walk, and I'm in a space where I can make that happen with a little bit of dominance so that nobody gets hurt. They're not safe enough. Hi, you. So Ocasio here has been, he puts himself into motion a lot, but he puts himself into motions that are chaotic. He does a lot of running and rearing and boxing and playing and galloping around. And those aren't necessarily the best ways to process emotion. And so what I've been doing lately is I've been putting him in what I call a walking practice, where he and my stallion Atlas, who also has a lot of trouble with these sort of stagnating emotions, hi buddy, get to spend time walking together. And this is something that I'm going to talk about more in my Patreon group. It's not freedom-based training. It does use a little bit of dominance. But ultimately, for the good of the horse, if it helps them feel good in their skin, feel good in their body, maybe freedom isn't necessarily ultimately the right course for everybody. So I'm learning as I go. I like freedom-based training the best. I like giving the horse the opportunity to evolve into each skill very naturally. And if they don't want to move and process their emotions, that's fine. But if there are some negative health consequences of letting the horse do absolutely whatever it is they would choose, then maybe it isn't the right situation for that. I've been really, really lucky. Ari here is pretty emotionally stable. He doesn't have a lot of issues. He's very straightforward. So that means that if he chooses to move a little bit less, there's really no harm done. He can move a little bit less. As you see, he's not too fat, he's not too thin. He's just a really nice, steady horse. Interestingly enough, I just had parasite counts done, and of all my horses, he was the one that didn't have any parasites either. So there's something very lovely about him. He just is very straightforward in his nature. So therefore, he puts me in a pretty easy position where we can give him the freedom of choice. And then as I train with him, I can nudge him gently in a better direction. But there's no hurry. There's no downside to waiting until he wants to take long walks with me. I think the ability to take long walks, to travel through space, to look at the woods or the terrain or the view wherever you are, is one of the best ways that we process emotions. And as I was saying earlier, I just did it for myself when I did the 4x4x48 marathon, and I feel so much better. I mean, yeah, it was hard. It was really hard. But you get through a challenge like that, you finish a marathon, you finish whatever it is, that steady pace, and it does help you process a lot of the things that might have been kind of stuck in your body. I'm a big believer in it. Not everybody wants to do it in the form of a marathon. Look, I have ears. Hi, Ari. But it's sort of an interesting thing to think about. If you have a horse that doesn't process their emotions really well. And what I mean by that is maybe they feel bad and then they overreact because of the way they feel. Instead of feeling bad and saying, well, I need to change something to help all of us feel better, the horses that overreact because they feel bad, they might need a little bit more movement in their lives in order to process the way they feel. Ari. I see I missed some comments here. I'm going to scroll up and see. Rebecca says, the walking practice has been a game changer for Zav. You know, I love the sensitive, busy-minded horses, but it makes such a difference to his stress levels so he can hone his focus changes in a more productive and helpful way. Yeah. So, you know, some horses, and it sounds like Zav is one of them, you know, they're not as straightforward as my fabulous Ari here or Myrna, who was in my first movie. And those horses that get a little bit overwhelmed by their emotions and they don't know how to process them and they don't know what to do with them, they don't always make great choices when you give them tons of freedom. But if you can help them get some steady, fluid kind of movements, put those emotions in motion so they can process them, then you might end up with a horse that is underneath that absolutely as steady as Ari is, or Myrna. And so Anna says, hi from Sweden. I'm out with my horses too, but here it is evening. Wonderful. I love it. It's like a big tea party we're having. So those are my thoughts for today from Ari and Ocasio and Atlas up on the hill. And, you know, this is something that I don't really go into teaching my walking practice ideas until I get to my confidence course, which is the course that comes after my first foundation course. But it's something that I'm starting to realize is more and more important for people who have horses in captivity, who might have problems processing their emotions. And yes, it's wonderful if we can give them freedom to evolve to the place where they process their emotions really well, in a way that's totally their freedom of choice. Some of them might need a nudge along the way. Or maybe need is the wrong word. Maybe it's not so much that they need a nudge as they might be really grateful for a little bit more support in that area. So there's some food for thought. Thank you guys for joining me for tea time. Next Tuesday, I will be down in California in the Bay Area in Woodacre, teaching a clinic and some private lesson days. And if you guys are in the area, come see me. The following week, I will be in Portugal. So I'm looking forward to seeing some of you there too. And then I'll be home again after that. So have a wonderful day wherever you are. And I look forward to seeing you next week.